Hi, Carol. We have viewers showing up gradually on this snowy Thursday afternoon. Um, Tyler was setting us up here in the studio just a few minutes ago, and he's peering at the little television set off to the side here, watching this little square blink off and on. So he says something about internet is slow. So we're going to give it a try for today. We'll see what happens. But if you have trouble with things freezing on you, you can blame that snowy weather out there. And so we'll just have to give you another shot. Anyway, what are we going to talk about today? Um, we are, Patty says, it's snowing again. Yes, it sure is. I looked out the window. It's one of the nice things about where I work here at my sewing room. I have these big windows, so I get to see all the weather that comes in. But that means that I try really hard not to get distracted. Anyway, what do I want to talk about today? Today I want to talk about something that I learned since I started working here, and it's about the quilt backings that I get to deal with. And if you've had quilts quilted here recently, you know we kind of give you a guideline for your backing. You sew it together, or you don't, or whatever. But I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of a visual for you. So I have some props. This is a stick. It's actually a dowel because my fabric is not super huge. And I kind of wanted to explain to you why we ask sometimes that you sew your backing together in a particular way. So if this is the bar on my long arm machine, and this is how we start. We load the quilt backing. This is a really skinny backing. Must be one of those strip quilts, hey? When we load the backing, we fasten it to a bar at the front, and we fasten it to a bar at the back. And the bar at the back is where we start, because that's going to take up the quilt as we quilt it. Okay, so this is where we would start. This is the bar that's right at the front of the machine. And we fasten your quilt backing to that bar. And then we roll it up. And we try, oh, don't hurt the camera. Yeah, Tyler wouldn't like it if I hurt the camera. We try and keep it nice and smooth, because when we get to the very end, we don't want any lumps and bumps that might get stitched into your backing. So we roll and we smooth, and we roll and we smooth. Oh, and a lump. We just smooth it out as we go. So you can see that this piece of fabric I have is the length of a sheet. This is something that we can sew to a piece of backing that is maybe a little bit too short to go on the machine. But we roll and we roll and we roll. You can see how nice and smooth that's going on. Wow, this would be a great quilt. Maybe a quilt for a snake. And it's creeping over to the side, so we would keep it straight all the way down to the bottom. So this is how a backing would be rolled on if it was one piece of fabric. There we go. There's the end. That went on lovely. But lots of times we don't, oh, I forgot my paper. A lot of times we don't have enough fabric just to run one strip, or maybe we think we don't. And so we have to sew our fabric together. So I'm going to show you what happens, and this is one of the just really, really key tips when it comes to working with the long arm. I'm going to get my fancy thing, my fastener. So now I have a piece the same length, but it's twice as wide, because I've put a seam down the center. And if you are used to having stuff quilted with us, you've heard me mention this before, but a lot of times we think we have to do it this way. So I got my fabric, I've got my bar, we'll fasten it on. We don't really use duct tape, but it works for this. So now I'm going to roll my backing with the seam down the center onto the bar. And I'm going to try and keep it as smooth as possible. We did actually a video of this a while ago when we used full-size pieces of fabric. So I'm going to keep smoothing. But you can already see what's starting to happen to that fabric here. Ooh, it's getting quite a lump in it, and I've only got a few turns on my thing. That seam, when you stop and think, has got 3 layers of fabric where that seam is pressed over. So that means it's going to be 3 times as thick as the rest of my backing. I'm going to put a little tension on this, see if that helps. It might do. It might do. Ultimately, over a 96-inch quilt backing, which really isn't that big when you consider the size of some quilts, you can have up to 14 layers of fabric on that bar, which means even if you press your seams open, you've got 26 or 28 layers of fabric there. And it makes a bump. It makes a bump in the middle of the bar, and it makes the sides really sloppy. So how do we get away from that? How do we prevent that happening in our quilt backings? Well, we can always, we can load our backing this way, and then it's not a problem. Sometimes that doesn't work out for the size of the quilt we're working on. But I have a perfect solution, and you can see some of them behind me. We have just received an amazing selection of wide backs, we call them. Extra wide fabric designed specifically for the backs of your quilts. They usually range between 106 and 108 inches. And you can see they're not boring. They are absolutely spectacular. Comes in such a range of colors. Maybe you want something fairly neutral. This one is great. I don't know if you can see it too well on camera, and they're too heavy to move around. It's just a soft cream color with little sprigs of leaves in various colors. Would go with a lot of things. I put these colors together because these are new and they're gorgeous. This is almost like ocean bubbles on that guy. And that comes in a wide variety of colors. I threw the turquoise one out here because it's really pretty. And swirls. If you like neutrals, this is a grunge here with some polka dots on it. The nice thing with using a wide back is no seams. They are big enough to accommodate almost every size of quilt. Now, if you're doing a 110 by 120 quilt top, even a wide back, you might have to add an extra strip, but that's okay. I did the calculations when I was getting ready for today, and these guys, for a quilt, an average quilt that is maybe 72 by 84, your extra wide fabric actually works out cheaper. They're ranging between $32 and $35 a meter, and you go, oh, that sounds awful. But when you consider the regular price of fabric, these guys actually work out cheaper than having to buy enough fabric to piece your backing. I found one today. I was helping a lovely customer with her quilt, and I thought, I'm going to go look at some of these wide backs. I have to show you this. This is spectacular. I'll move my chair This one here that you see right center front, this goes right to there. This is an ombre, and it goes from deepest purple through the lighter purples, pinks, magentas, and then flashes right to, this is the center of the fabric, that green. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And then it fades back, of course, on the other side, the other way. So if you've got a huge quilt, it's almost like getting two quilts. This is so pretty. You could easily turn that quilt over and enjoy this side of it. This is just one colorway. They are going fast. There's a couple of others. There's one that's softer if you like the grays. I love the soft ones, but I like a vibrant back like that. The other nice thing that I like about these wide back fabrics is because they're big, you quite often have leftovers, which are great. They are the same quality fabric as what you have out on the rest of the shelves. They're not inferior in any ways. They are also a little bit softer and finer. So what does that mean for you when you're quilting? What does it mean when you use them in a quilt? What it means particularly, if you get that quilt long-armed, is it's not going to be quite as heavy or quite as stiff as if you had used a standard weight fabric. Doesn't mean they're that thin. They're equal quality to any of the fabrics out there, but they just seem more flexible. They're wonderful, wonderful fabrics to use on the backs of your quilts. So it's still snowing. What if we want flannel on the back of our quilt? This blue guy up here, I don't know if you can see him. There he is. Yes. This is a flannel wide back. So yes, they come in flannels as well. More limited range of pattern, more limited range of design, but hey, still nice and cozy. And you don't have to contend. Believe me, those seams on pieced flannel backings, they can really build up a lump for you. They come in solids. Anne's got a question for me. How do you handle the backs that come in pieced, 2 or 3 pieced? That's a good question, Anne. It really depends on a lot of things when we're quilting the quilt. First of all, it depends on how much extra fabric is around the outside over the size of the quilt. So if I've got an extra 6 inches top, bottom, and on the sides, then sometimes if that backing is pieced this way and the quilt goes this way, sometimes I can take that whole quilt sandwich and turn it sideways. So now the seam is running this way. If this was the bar on my long arm, the seam would run parallel. So when I went to quilt it, the top of the quilt would be over here, the bottom of the quilt would be over here. I would technically be quilting from side to side. That's most often what we do, but it's really dependent on whether you're having a design quilted on there that has an up and a down. You know, if you don't mind the tulips going across your quilt, that's okay. But if you want the tulips going up and down your quilt, then that's how we have to put it on the machine. If you have a backing that you've worked really hard, you've got those leftover blocks, and you want to work those into your quilt back, that almost works better than having that single seam. So don't be afraid to take those blocks and move them around here, or take 6 different pieces of fabric and join them up. It seems to even out that thick lump problem that we have. But so pieced backs are not nearly as difficult for us to get loaded smoothly on the machine as that single center seam. And then sometimes we just can't get away from it. Sometimes the backing fabric, the quilt top, it has to go on this way because otherwise the doggies are running with their little feet in the air and we can't get away from that center seam. So if you're working with a good long armor, an experienced long armor, and hopefully those of us here, we've had enough experience, we can kind of work around it. We snuggle it around a bit. We put our side clamps on and tension it, and we try and work around it. But when you're preparing your back, if you have the opportunity to either buy one of these wide backs, which I love, or piece your backing with the seam horizontally, that would just make our life so much easier. And what happens is you end up with a better result. And that's kind of our goal, really. Our goal is for all the quilts that we do in the long arm area to be not perfect, because hey, we're always trying to get just that little bit better, but we want all of the quilts to come out so that our customers are happy with the results. And I know I've quilted for a lot of you folks out there in Ethernet land. Fortunately, some of you come into the store too. So yeah, pieced backs are great. And yeah, that's true. Anna's saying we need to think through the process so the quilt it winds up being what you want it to be. And I don't mind if you want to come in. I don't mind walking you through sort of, well, this is what we ask for, and this is how we can achieve that goal. While we're on the subject of quilt backings, I know a lot of you like to use Cuddle. You like to use Fireside on your quilt backs, and those work really, really well. They do make your quilt heavy because the fabric itself weighs more, but they're nice and cozy. They quilt beautifully. I don't have any problems with them on the machine. The same kind of suggestions apply, because can you imagine if that seam was maybe out of a Fireside, how thick that would be? So if at all possible, horizontal seams. The only difference with those kinds of backings is they're polyester. So we put the fuzzy side down, and then we put our quilt batting on top, and then we put our quilt. Well, the quilt top is going to stick to that quilt batting. Always does. Clings nicely. It's beautiful. But that batting on that polyester quilt backing, it just slides around. So we always ask our customers, but we will have to lift that batting and 505 spray. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's going to sleep on me for a minute. I know you can still hear me. So yeah, what we do is we 505 the batting to that Fireside or Cuddle backing so that it doesn't shift around as the machine stitches it. Not a big deal on that one. I should mention as well, though, that Cuddle does come in a 90-inch, again, limited colors. So if you have a quilt that is less than 90 inches in one dimension, search out our wider Cuddle, because that, again, you don't have to worry about getting that seam going in the right direction. What else can I tell you about quilt backings? A lot of people, and this is a personal preference, I see a lot of people who try to get a binding fabric that matches the front and the back. That's okay if you want to. Personally, it doesn't bother me too much. These extra wide fabrics, I know for certain that if you choose one off the floor here and you just leave it with me directly instead of taking it home, perfectly all right. We just put a sticker on your intake sheet. You pay for it all at once. But when I unfold that, the center of these extra wides is always creased. So let's say you buy the extra wide backing. You take it home and it lives in the bag until your quilt is finished. And then you go, oh, right, I've got that backing. And you bring it in here. When I open this out to put it on the machine, it always has creases in it. So I know a lot of people don't like to pre-wash their fabrics, and that's okay. But when I get an extra wide like that and I'm loading it on the machine, I have a fabric steamer, and I just steam those creases out as I'm rolling it on. It works so good. They just soften right away. So if you've got your fabric home and you bought the extra wide and you don't feel like washing and ironing, how hard is it to iron a piece of fabric that's 108 inches wide? Drape it over the shower rod, get your fabric steamer out, and just steam some of those hard creases out of it. They'll lay much flatter that way, and you'll end up with a much better result on your quilt. So, what else can I tell you about quilt backings? Plain backings are quite often a quilter's dream. So something like this, or something, even that one. We do have our Kona white extra wide backing. So those are the ones that you want to put on the quilt where you are getting the custom quilting done, so that all of those glorious feathers or beautiful shapes, those computerized block designs, show up to advantage on the back of a quilt like that. So yeah, come in, feel some of our extra wide backings, check out the texture of them. I'm always tempted when I'm using the extra wides. I always save the extras, of course, but that's a quality of fabric that you can use on the front of a quilt as well. So they're beautiful, and I'm seriously tempted by some of these ombres, because I think just half a meter of that cut across the strip, the different colors that you're going to get to work into your quilt. And quite often some of our newer fabric collections are coming with a coordinating extra wide back, so that you can have the whole package matched up. So that's what I have for you today. Just a little tidbit of information on quilt backings, and especially on our extra wides. By all means, check them out and drop by, say hi, show me your next project, because I love seeing people's projects. And if we can help you decide how much to buy of our extra wides, we'll be happy to. Save a little bit of money over buying the regular fabrics as well. So until I see you next time, next week, we'll maybe have the Giggle Girls back on Tuesday. What did Chelsea call it? 2 for Tuesday? You'll be talking with Leah tomorrow, most likely. Got some exciting classes coming up. And tomorrow afternoon, if you're registered in it, I will be class 2 on One Stitch at a Time, our hand embroidery class, and delve into a few more simple stitches as we go forward. Nice way to end the week. Relax and chill out on a Friday afternoon. So until next time, have a great afternoon. Stay safe. Drive carefully if you have to go out, because the roads are, wintry driving conditions like that. So take it easy, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining.